The cold in the boardroom was worse than a January wind in Chicago. When Arthur, my son, the boy I raised, chaired the vote to fire me from the very company I built, I did not look at him. I looked at her, Isabel, his wife, the one who was smiling. My name is Margaret Reed. I am 58 years old, and I am, or perhaps I should say I was, the founder of Crestline Innovations. I am not the kind of woman who inherited anything. I built my life and my company in the unforgiving Chicago wind. Crestline started 30 years ago in my garage, fueled by bad coffee and a belief that I could code better than the men in suits who kept patting me on the head. It was not just a business. It was my child, the one that actually listened. It cost me 2 marriages and countless nights I should have spent watching my son grow up. I poured the concrete of that building with my own sweat. My son, Arthur, he is 32. That guilt I mentioned, it found its target in him. Because I was always closing a deal or debugging a system, I overcompensated. Arthur never wanted for anything: the best schools, the fastest cars, the assumption that the world owed him comfort. I gave him a silver spoon, forgetting that it takes steel to build something real. I thought by giving him the company, I was giving him a purpose. I was wrong. And then came Isabel. She blew into his life like a sudden, expensive storm. Younger than him, beautiful in that sharp, curated way that costs a fortune to maintain. She came from nothing and was desperate to erase that fact. Her ambition was a roaring fire, and she saw my son not as a man, but as a gasoline can. She craved status, the kind that Crestline's legacy could buy her. I saw it. I saw the hunger in her eyes when she looked at the building, at my home. But Arthur was blind. He called it drive. I called it avarice. About a year ago, I decided it was time. I was tired. I wanted to see if I could be something other than a CEO. I moved myself into the chairwoman role. It was a title, mostly. I handed the day-to-day operations, the CEO title, to Arthur. It felt right. A legacy passed on. But I am not a fool. I kept my controlling shares, 51%. It was a safety net I never thought I would need. This early retirement was agonizing. I have never been good at sitting still. My days, once packed with back-to-back meetings and strategic decisions, were suddenly empty. I felt useless, a ghost haunting my own creation. I would walk the halls and feel the hum of the servers, the energy of the place, and ache to be back in the center of it. But I held back. I told myself this was Arthur's time. I naively believed he would honor the foundation I had laid, that he would build upon it, not dismantle it. The first crack appeared quickly. Isabel, who had no official title, no technical background, and 0 business experience, suddenly had an office. Not just any office, but the one connecting to Arthur's, the one I used to use for my senior strategy sessions. It was redecorated overnight in shades of cream and gold, looking more like a high-end salon than a tech hub. Then, my emails started going unanswered. I would send Arthur a query about a supply chain analytic, a simple question. Hours later, a reply would come, but not from him. It was from Isabel. "Hi, Margaret. Arthur is just swamped in back-to-backs right now. I am helping him organize his inbox. What did you need?" Her tone was sickeningly sweet, the digital equivalent of a pat on the head. I was being managed, in my own company, by my daughter-in-law. The shift became undeniable in the quarterly board meetings. The numbers were too good. They were polished. Projections were rounded up. Risks minimized. The solid, long-term research projects I had championed, the ones that would define the next decade of innovation, were suddenly under review or paused indefinitely. In their place were flashy, short-term investments, quick hits, high margins, zero substance. It was Isabel's style, all flash and no foundation. Arthur just sat there, reading the script she had clearly prepared for him, smiling for approval. Not from me, from her. The small, polite dismissals soon escalated into outright exclusion. There was a high-level strategy meeting scheduled for the first Tuesday of the month. It had been on my calendar for weeks. I arrived at the executive conference room, the one with the skyline view I had picked out myself, and my keycard flashed red. Access denied. I tried again. Red. I could hear muted voices inside. I knocked. The door opened a crack, and the new assistant, Isabel's hire, looked out. Her eyes were wide with a poorly feigned panic. "Oh, Madam Chair, there must be a system glitch," she chirped. "It is just a technical review. We will be sure to send you the minutes." The door clicked shut in my face. A glitch. I had designed the security protocols for that door myself. There was no glitch. The next blow was personal. I came in on a Wednesday, intending to have lunch with my assistant, Mrs. Davis. She had been with me for 20 years. She knew where I had buried all the bodies, metaphorically speaking. Her desk was empty. Not just empty, but sterilized. The photos of her grandchildren were gone. The ergonomic keyboard I had bought her replaced with a standard issue. Isabel's new girl was sitting there. "Can I help you?" "Margaret," she asked. The use of my first name a deliberate little barb. "Where is Mrs. Davis?" I asked, my voice flat. "Oh," she smiled, a bright, empty gesture. Arthur and Isabel gave her a wonderful early retirement package. She was so thrilled. She is probably on a beach in Florida by now. Mrs. Davis hated the beach. She hated the heat. She had been planning to work until she was 70, that afternoon. I went to my old terminal in the chairman's office. I tried to log into the Helios project server. This was my skunk works, the digital vault where I kept my ideas for the next generation of Crestline tech. My password failed. I tried again. A pop-up appeared. "Your access level has been restricted. Current status guest." Guest. In the house I built. I stormed past the new assistant, not bothering to knock, and found Arthur in his office. Isabel was, naturally, perched on the edge of his desk. "My access to Helios is gone," I said, dispensing with pleasantries. Arthur had the grace to look uncomfortable, but Isabel answered for him. "Oh, Margaret, we are just implementing some new IT security policies to prevent data leaks. You know how sensitive that material is." Arthur nodded, avoiding my eyes. "It is just protocol. Mum, we have to tighten the ship. It is not personal." But it was. It was the only thing that was personal. The isolation became a suffocating fog. My one-on-one meetings with Arthur, the last thread of our connection, were cancelled. First, it was a client emergency. Then, he was travelling. Soon. My calls just went straight to voicemail, the inbox inevitably full. I felt like a phantom. Employees who had been with me for decades, men and women I had hired personally, would see me in the hallway, freeze, and suddenly find something fascinating about the carpet or their shoes. They would not meet my eyes. The chill I felt in the boardroom was now everywhere. I started watching them from a distance. I could not help it. I noticed a recurring dinner reservation in the company's executive expense reports. Arthur and Isabel, twice a week, at Gibson's. Their guest, Philip Vance. My stomach turned. Vance was a vulture capitalist. He specialized in hostile takeovers, dismantling companies, and selling them for parts. I had personally thrown him out of my office twice in the last decade. He was the antithesis of everything I had built Crestline to be. And now, my son and his wife were buying him steak. The final piece of the puzzle slid into place late one night. I could not sleep. I was using my chairman's financial oversight access, one of the few privileges they had not yet figured out how to revoke, to review the month's expenditures. Most of it was standard. And then I saw it. A massive wire transfer, a staggering sum, paid to a shell company I had never heard of, Oversight Solutions, LLC. It was approved by Arthur's signature. The line item for the service was vague, just a code. But the memo attached to the invoice read, "Consultation fees for senior governance restructuring." They were not just sidelining me. They were restructuring me out. They cornered me on a Sunday evening. I was in my study when Arthur and Isabel walked in. Unannounced. Isabel was holding a thick, glossy travel brochure, and she wore an expression of profound, artificial concern. Arthur hovered behind her, looking like a teenager dragged to a parent-teacher conference. "Margaret," Isabel began, her voice syrupy sweet. "Arthur and we have just been so worried about you." I kept my face neutral, setting my pen down. "Worried. You have seemed so stressed, so tired," she continued, gliding forward to place the brochure on my antique desk. "You deserve a real vacation, a total escape." Arthur finally spoke, his voice weak. "It is a 3-week luxury cruise. Mom, to Alaska. First class. All the way. We just want you to, rest." Isabel's smile was a predatory slash. "And you simply must turn off your phone, disconnect completely, get away from it all." There it was. It was not a gift. It was a banishment. They needed me gone, unreachable, and offline for 21 days. The senior governance restructuring invoice flashed in my mind. This was their window. They were scheduling their coup. The old Margaret, the CEO who built an empire, would have torn the brochure in half. The new Margaret, the sidelined chairwoman, the ghost in the halls, saw the opening. I forced my shoulders to slump. I let out a long, weary sigh and touched my temple. "Oh, Arthur," I whispered, looking past Isabel and directly at my son. I do not know what to say. It is so thoughtful." Isabel's eyes lit up. She had expected a fight. This easy capitulation was exactly what she wanted. "I have always wanted to see the glaciers," I said, picking up the brochure and feigning interest. "But 3 weeks? Are you sure you two can manage?" "Absolutely," Isabel said, jumping in before Arthur could speak. "It is all handled. We want you to enjoy this. You have earned it." I bet you will handle it, I thought. The next week was a performance. I allowed them to see the printed flight itineraries on my kitchen counter. I discussed packing lists and shore excursions. I was the very picture of a grateful, exhausted mother, finally ready to let go. The morning of the flight, they insisted on driving me to O'Hare. The ride was tense, filled with bright, brittle small talk about the weather in Juneau. At Terminal 5, they walked me all the way to the security checkpoint. Arthur gave me a stiff, awkward hug. "Have a great time, Mum. You really deserve this." He could not quite meet my eyes. He knew, on some level, what he was doing. Isabel, on the other hand, was a true sociopath. She embraced me warmly, her cheek brushing mine. "Enjoy every second," she whispered. "Do not even think about us." "I will try not to," I said, pulling back with a small smile. I picked up my single carry-on bag, waved one last time, and walked through the TSA checkpoint. I did not proceed to the gate. I found a Starbucks, ordered a black coffee, and took a seat with a clear view of the security exit. I waited. For 45 agonizing minutes. I watched them. They stood there, looking at the departure board, waiting, no doubt, to confirm that my flight was boarding. Finally, Isabel nudged Arthur. She smiled, linked her arm through his, and they turned and walked out of the terminal. They looked relieved. The second they were out of sight, I stood up, left the untouched coffee on the table, walked back out of the terminal, and got into the first taxi in the queue. "The residences at 22 North," I said to the driver. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, I was in suite 4105. It was a sterile, overpriced corporate apartment, and it was perfect. I had chosen it specifically because its floor-to-ceiling windows looked directly across the Chicago River and into the executive suite of the Crestline Innovations building. I could see my old office, now painted in Isabel's preferred shades of cream and gold. I paid for the apartment for 1 month, in cash. I used more cash to buy a new, high-security laptop and 3 separate, unregistered burner phones. I was a ghost. I knew Isabel. She was meticulous. She would check. She would need proof that I was really gone. I was ready for that. Weeks ago, when I first smelled the smoke, I had downloaded a dozen high-resolution stock images of Alaska at exactly 6 p.m., just as my flight was supposedly reaching cruising altitude. My personal social media account came alive. A pre-scheduled post went live. It was a stunning picture of a glacier carving into a pristine blue bay. The caption was simple: "Off on the adventure of a lifetime. So grateful to my wonderful son and daughter-in-law for this incredible gift. Disconnecting for a while. See you all in 3 weeks." From my glass tower on the 41st floor, I had a perfect view of my company. I could see the lights in the executive suite, see the tiny figures moving behind the glass. But I was blind. I needed eyes and ears inside. I needed a ghost in the machine. My list was short. Most of the old guard were gone, pushed out by Isabel's early retirement packages. But one name remained, buried in the basement: Frank Rizzo. Frank was 60 years old and had been my head of IT for 25 of them. He was a curmudgeon, a brilliant, surly, old-school systems architect who hated open-plan offices and preferred the hum of a server rack to human conversation. He had built Crestline's digital fortress, and he was loyal to me, not to the title. I knew he loathed Arthur, who he considered a spoiled child, and he openly detested Isabel, who had, I heard, tried to tell him his network infrastructure was outdated. They had recently restructured him, moving his office from the secure command center on the 30th floor to a windowless closet in the sub-basement, next to the HVAC. They were idiots. They thought they were punishing him. They were just putting him next to the main data conduit. I used the first of my burner phones. I sent a text message to a private number I had memorized a decade ago. It was just 7 words. "Frank, I need to talk. Your terms." The reply came 3 hours later. 10 p. M. Whitey's. Come alone. Whitey's was an all-night diner in a part of the suburbs that had seen better decades. The vinyl on the booths was cracked and taped, and the air smelled of stale coffee and grease. It was perfect. I took a cab and wore a baseball cap, sitting in a booth in the back. He slid in opposite me exactly at 10, looking older than his 60 years. He had not shaved. "You look like hell, Margaret," he grunted, not as a greeting, but as a statement of fact. "You look worse," I replied. He waved down a waitress and ordered a black coffee. I was 2 days from quitting. You know, I already cleared my desk. I am not going to sit in that concrete coffin and watch that boy you raised drive your company into the ground. He's a goddamn circus act. And Isabel is the ringleader. I finished for him. She's worse. Frank snarled. She's the one with the whip. She held a meeting last week with the new IT VP, that 20-something kid she hired, about migrating our assets. She does not even know what the assets are. It is a joke. I am done. It is not a joke. Frank, I said, leaning forward. My voice was low. It is not mismanagement. It is a coup. They are planning something big and fast. They sent me on this phony cruise to get me out of the way. I am not in Alaska. I am in a condo across the river. His eyes, which had been dull with anger, sharpened. He finally understood. I need access, I said. They downgraded me to guest. I need my old privileges back. I need full admin rights. And I need you to build me a door that they will never, ever see. He was quiet for a long time, stirring his coffee. I knew he was not thinking about money. Frank was a man of pure professional pride. They had demoted him. They had insulted his work. That woman, he said finally, his voice shaking with a quiet rage. She asked me, in front of her new VP, if I understood the cloud. Me. I built a private cloud for this company in 2008, when that kid was still in high school. He nodded. A sharp, decisive movement. To hell with them. They want to see an outdated system. I will show them what an old-timer can do. He looked at me. I am not doing this for money, Margaret. I am doing this because they are sloppy, and I cannot stand to watch amateurs break my toys. He told me to go back to my apartment and set up the new laptop. An hour later, my burner phone buzzed. A link and a string of code. I followed his instructions. My screen flickered. A command prompt opened. And then I was in. I had the keys to the kingdom. I had access to everything. The internal cameras, the email servers, the encrypted financials, the audio logs from the boardroom microphones. Just as I was about to disconnect, a final message came through from Frank's secure channel. I am in, Margaret, and I am already seeing things. They were not just trying to lock you out of the business. I did a search for your employee file number. They locked it down. But I got in. You should know. The day you left. Isabel's office put in a priority 1 request to human resources. They wanted all of your personal medical history and your corporate insurance files pulled and sealed. They did not just want you gone, Margaret. They wanted to prove you were crazy. My new life was a vampire's. I slept during the day when the offices were slow and lived by night, bathed in the blue light of my laptop and the distant glow of the Crestline Tower. My apartment on the 41st floor became a command center, and my primary weapon was a pair of high-powered binoculars I had bought for cash. I ate mechanically. I did not sleep. I just watched. I watched my office, become her stage. On the second night, I saw them. Isabel was sitting in my chair, the custom-built, ergonomic one I had spent $1,000 on. She had her feet propped up on my desk, the one carved from reclaimed walnut. Arthur, my son, was standing behind her. He was rubbing her shoulders, even from across the river. I could see the dynamic. He was the attendant. She was the queen. He looked exhausted. She looked energized. On the third night, just after midnight, the lights in the CEO suite flicked back on. This was not the cleaning crew. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, long after the lobby was closed. Philip Vance got out. He was carrying a heavy leather briefcase. He did not sign in. A security guard I did not recognize personally escorted him up. Through the binoculars, I watched him enter the office. Isabel greeted him with a kiss on the cheek. Arthur just shook his hand. They were there for 2 hours. Vance left carrying the briefcase, and it looked lighter. The binoculars were good, but Frank's access was better. The VPN tunnel was my lifeline. I was no longer just watching. I was in the building. I pulled up the internal security camera logs for the executive floor. There they were, the timestamps matching my observations. But I needed more. I needed sound. I activated the conference room's audio feed. They were arrogant. They assumed no one was listening. Yesterday, they held a formal meeting. Frank pinged me 10 minutes before it started. I saw them file into the main boardroom. Arthur, at the head of the table he did not earn. Isabel, sitting at his right hand, effectively running the meeting. Philip Vance, looking smug. And one other person, Crestline's chief legal counsel, a man who had been on my payroll for 15 years. I patched the audio feed through my speakers, the sound filling my dark, empty apartment. We all agree. Then, I heard Isabel's voice, sharp and metallic. Phase 2 is authorized. Arthur mumbled something about due diligence. Vance cut him off. The diligence is done. Arthur, my team is satisfied. We proceed with the transfer of the asset as discussed. I froze. The asset, Phase 2, the lawyer clarified, his voice smooth, is the liquidation of the Helios intellectual property, a full transfer to Vance Capital for the agreed-upon sum. I stopped breathing. Helios, my pet project. The artificial intelligence system I had poured a decade and millions of dollars into. My legacy. They were selling it. I immediately dove into Arthur's sent emails. It took me less than 30 seconds. The draft contracts were right there, in a folder labeled MISC. They were selling my life's work for pennies on the dollar. It was a fire sale. But the numbers did not make sense. It was too cheap. It was desperate. I started digging deeper, past the emails, into the encrypted drives. Frank's admin access meant no door was locked. I found a secure folder, one Isabel had created, labeled Personal. Inside were scans of jewelry receipts, bank codes, and a single, encrypted audio file. The file name was just Motivation. I decrypted it. It was a recording, clearly made in secret. It was not a meeting. It was a conversation. It was Isabel's voice, but not the sharp, boardroom version. This was soft, seductive, laced with a manufactured panic. Arthur, baby, you do not understand. She was whispering, we cannot wait. We need the money now. Arthur's voice was muffled. Mum would never approve this sale. Isabel cut him off, her voice hardening. Your mother is not well. She is too old. She is confused. She is losing it. She forgets things. What if they find out about the debts? What then? There was a long pause. This is the only way. Arthur, she cooed. Sell Helios. Get the money. Pay them off. Then we can finally have our own lives. It is just a business. It is not more important than us. My blood ran cold. The debts. They were not restructuring. They were looting. They were gutting the company to solve a problem I did not yet understand. And they were using my supposed confusion as the legal cover to do it. The debts. The word echoed in the silent apartment, colder than the air conditioning. It was a word of desperation. It was the key. I pivoted from the company servers to the open web. I hired a private investigator, an expensive one, paying him in cryptocurrency through an encrypted service. I gave him one name, Isabel. I told him I was a concerned business associate, and I wanted a full financial background check. Rush job. I wanted to know where every penny she had ever spent came from and where it went. The report came back in less than 48 hours. It was not just bad, it was catastrophic. Isabel was not just a social climber, she was a high-stakes gambler. The nothing she came from had left her with a hunger she tried to fill at private, high-limit baccarat tables in Las Vegas. She was millions in debt, not to casinos, but to private lenders, the kind of people who do not accept installment plans, the kind of people who break things. Arthur, with his trust fund and his assumption of endless comfort, would have no idea. This was Isabel's secret, and it was threatening to drown her. I cross-referenced the dates on her markers with the Crestline Oversight Solutions invoice. It was not a consultancy. It was a money laundering pass-through. She was embezzling, using company funds to pay her gambling debts, and she was still sinking. That was why they were selling Helios for pennies. It was not a business deal. It was a lifeline. They needed Vance's cash now, before the lenders came to collect. But selling Helios was one thing. It was an asset. It still did not explain how they planned to seize my company, my 51%. They could not sell my shares, not without my signature. I was in Alaska, healthy and unreachable. Unless I was not healthy. Frank's words came back to me. They wanted your medical files. I went back into the server. This time, I went straight to the Human Resources Directory. Frank had been right. My file was locked. But not from me. Not anymore. I opened it. At first, it was just standard procedure. Insurance, dental, the usual. Then I saw a new subfolder, created 3 weeks ago. Klein. T. MD. It was full of emails, scanned documents, and reports. I opened the first email. It was from Isabel, using her Crestline account, to a Dr. Titus Klein. Thank you so much for agreeing to consult on this sensitive family matter, she wrote. As we discussed, Arthur and I are just so worried about his mother's recent episodes. I read on. The email chain was a meticulously crafted fiction. Isabel described me forgetting the name of a senior VP. She detailed a fictional incident where I got lost in the parking garage. She painted a picture of a brilliant mind, sadly and rapidly declining. She was building a case. And then I found the referral. My heart, which I thought had turned to ice, broke. It was a scanned letter from Dr. Aris, my family physician for 30 years. The man who had given Arthur his first tetanus shot. He had signed a formal referral for me to undergo a full psychiatric and cognitive capacity evaluation with Dr. Klein, citing family concerns over memory loss and erratic behavior. Arthur. Arthur must have been the one to go to him, to lie to him, to convince him. My own son. The final file was the evaluation itself, a 30-page report from Dr. Klein, whom a quick search revealed was an old college sorority sister of Isabel's. The report was devastating. It was also a complete fabrication. It claimed I had undergone a series of tests during the past month. It used clinical, cold language. It spoke of significant cognitive decline, paranoid ideation, and inability to process complex financial information. The final diagnosis, on the last page, was a death sentence, early onset Alzheimer's disease. It is in my professional opinion that Margaret Reed is medically incapacitated and no longer competent to manage her own affairs or make complex business decisions. I sat back, the words blurring. They had not just sidelined me. They had given me a disease. They had declared me legally insane. I knew exactly where this was going. I pulled up the corporate bylaws, the ones I had written myself 3 decades ago. I scrolled to Section 8B, the incapacitated executive clause. It was a standard provision, one you never think you will use. It stated that in the event the controlling shareholder was deemed medically incapacitated by 2 certified physicians, the board could vote to appoint a temporary proxy, a trustee, to vote those shares in the best interest of the company's health. They had the referral from Dr. Aris. They had the diagnosis from Dr. Klein. They did not need to sell my shares. They were just going to vote them. Arthur, as my proxy, would have the full power of my 51%. He could vote to sell the company. He could vote to fire the board. He could vote to fire me. This was not a robbery. This was an execution. So, that was the weapon. Section 8B. The clause I wrote to protect the company from a founder's tragic decline, now twisted to orchestrate its theft. With Arthur as my proxy, he would control my 51%. He would be me. This was never just about selling Helios to pay off Isabel's gambling debts. That was just the first phase. That was how they got Vance to the table. The real prize was the company itself. The senior governance restructuring was not about me. It was about them. I dove into Arthur's calendar, the one he and Isabel now shared. It was right there, blocked out in red. Emergency board meeting, mandatory. It was scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow. My blood turned to ice. My fake Alaskan cruise had me returning in 2 days. They were not even waiting. They were giving themselves a 48-hour window to complete the transaction and vanish before I ever stepped off the plane. I pulled up the meeting agenda attached to the invitation. It was concise. It was brutal. Item 1. A vote to acknowledge the medical report of Dr. Titus Klein, confirming the incapacity of Chairwoman Margaret Reed. Item 2. A vote to enact Section 8B and appoint CEO Arthur Reed as voting proxy for the Chairwoman's controlling shares. Item 3. A vote to approve the full acquisition of Margaret Reed's 51% stake by Vance Capital, pending immediate wire transfer. My son was not just trying to steal an asset. He was selling my entire life's work. He was selling me. He was firing me, stripping me of my shares, and declaring me mentally unfit, all in one clean, legal, devastating motion. Philip Vance would own Crestline by lunch. Arthur and Isabel would be on a plane to somewhere with no extradition treaty by dinner. their pockets full of Vance's money. The shock lasted only a second, replaced by a cold, hard rage I had not felt in 30 years. This was the same rage that had fueled me in my garage, the rage that had fought off investors who tried to dilute my shares, the rage that had built an empire. The moping, sidelined ghost in the apartment was gone. The CEO was back. I picked up the second burner phone, the one I used only for Frank. He answered on the first ring. "Frank," I said, my voice flat, holding no emotion. "They are making their move. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. They are not just selling Helios. They are selling the whole company. My shares." I heard him type. "I see it," he said. "The emergency meeting. Jesus. Margaret." "They locked me out," I said. "They changed the locks. They built a cage. I need you to stop building a key. I need you to blow the goddamn doors off." There was a pause. I heard more typing. Fast. Furious. "Margaret." Frank's voice was different. It was not just angry. It was alarmed. "It is not just tomorrow. It is now. I am watching the main financial ledger, the one that requires your specific sign-off." "What is it?" "Our chief legal counsel, the bastard at the meeting. He just initiated a wire transfer, a massive one. A bonus, he called it. Approved by Arthur." "Where is it going?" "Frank." "A numbered account, in the Caymans. I am running a trace. He is at O'Hare. Margaret. Right now. His flight to Grand Cayman leaves in 90 minutes. He is running. He is taking his payout, and he is running tonight." The plan had accelerated. They were not waiting for the meeting. The lawyer was getting out, which meant the deal was already done. The meeting tomorrow was just a formality, just the last nail. They were emptying the safe before they even sold the house. My first call was not to the police. The lawyer was running, and the police are a blunt instrument. They stop a running man. They do not stop a corporate transaction. I needed a surgeon. I picked up the third burner phone, the one reserved for an apocalypse. The line clicked. "Brenda Riley," a voice said, wide awake and sharp. It was 2 a.m. "Brenda, it is Margaret Reed," I said. "I am not in Alaska. I am in Chicago, and my company is being stolen as we speak. I need you. Now." I gave her the address of the corporate apartment. 20 minutes, she said, and hung up. Brenda Riley was not a lawyer in the traditional sense. She was a weapon in a $5,000 suit, a corporate shark who specialized in hostile takeovers and founder disputes. She walked into the suite at 2:15 a.m., her eyes taking in the laptop, the binoculars, the burner phones. She did not ask me how I was. She said, "Show me." For the next hour, I laid it all out, the command center, the VPN access Frank had built. I played her the recording of Isabel manipulating Arthur, the whispers about the debts and she is losing it. I showed her the faked medical reports from Dr. Klein, the referral from my own family doctor, the email chain between Isabel and her sorority sister. I showed her the contract to sell Helios. And finally, I showed her the agenda for the 10 a.m. meeting, the vote to declare me incompetent, and the sale of my 51% stake to Philip Vance. Brenda was silent, her face a mask. She sipped the black coffee I had handed her. "The medical fraud is the leverage," she said, her voice cold. "The wire transfer to the Caymans is the smoking gun. The 10 a.m. meeting is the execution. They are not just greedy, Margaret. They are sloppy." She pulled out her own phone. "They think they have 48 hours. The lawyer at O'Hare thinks he is safe. They are wrong. She hit a number on her speed dial. Judge Morrison, wake up. It is Brenda. I am calling in that marker from the K-Corp merger. She paced the small apartment, her voice low and cutting. I have a sitting CEO, Philip Vance, and a general counsel who is currently en route to O'Hare to flee the jurisdiction. I have evidence of massive, ongoing securities fraud. I need an emergency TRO. I need an immediate federal asset freeze on Vance Capital and the personal accounts of... She looked at me. I named the lawyer. Effective, immediately. She listened. Yes, Your Honor. The evidence is digital and absolute. Thank you. She hung up. Vance's accounts are frozen. The lawyer's vacation is cancelled. He will be met by federal agents before he reaches his gate. She immediately dialed another number. SEC Enforcement, Chicago Field Office, Duty Officer. This is Brenda Riley. I am filing a formal whistleblower report on behalf of the majority shareholder of Crestline Innovations. I am sending you a secure file right now containing proof of conspiracy to defraud, market manipulation, and insider trading. You will want a team here by mid-morning. She hung up. They will be listening. Now, your turn, Brenda said. The minority board members, the ones who are not in on it, the ones Arthur has been steamrolling. I used my secure line. I made 3 calls, waking up the only 3 people on the board I had trusted. This is Margaret. I am in Chicago. I need you at my location at 6 a.m. No, I will not explain on the phone. If you value your investment and your reputation, you will be here. By 6:05 a.m., they were in the apartment, bleary-eyed and confused. I gave them the 5-minute version. I showed them the medical report declaring me insane and the agenda item selling their investment to a vulture. Their faces turned from confusion to ashen horror, and then to a cold, hard rage. We have to stop the meeting? One of them, a man named Henderson, sputtered, pulling out his phone. We will call the other members. We will expose them now. No. Brenda's voice cut through the room. Everyone turned. She was standing by the window, looking at the Crestline Tower as the sun began to tint the sky. You will do nothing. You will not call anyone. The 10 o'clock meeting will proceed exactly as scheduled. I stared at her. Brenda, they will vote. They will have the majority. They will pass the resolution. Yes, she said, a small, cold smile on her lips. Let them. Let Arthur stand up and read that fraudulent medical report into the official record. Let him call the vote to declare you incompetent. Let him, as proxy, vote to sell your shares. Let Philip Vance formally accept the offer. Let them all commit multiple felonies in a room full of witnesses. She turned from the window to look at me. We are not going to stop the crime, Margaret. We are going to watch them commit it, live, in front of God and the SEC. At 10 o'clock on the dot, I was not in the boardroom. I was in Frank's sub-basement office, watching the live feed from the boardroom's ceiling camera on a high-definition monitor. Brenda Riley stood beside me, holding a burner phone. Frank was at his terminal, his fingers poised on the screen. I watched them take their places. Arthur sat at the head of the table, in my chair. He looked pale, but he was wearing his most expensive suit. Isabel was not at the table. She had arranged a chair for herself against the wall, just behind him, like a queen holding court. She was dressed in bright white, smiling. At the far end, Philip Vance lounged in his seat, checking his watch, his face a mask of smug impatience. The other board members, the ones who were not in on the con, looked nervous, whispering to each other. My three allies, as instructed, sat silently, their faces unreadable. Arthur fumbled with his papers, then stood. The camera's microphone was perfect. I could hear him clear his throat. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," he began, his voice dripping with a false, heavy sorrow. "We are here today to make a very difficult, very painful decision regarding the health of my mother, Margaret Reed." He paused, letting the fake emotion hang in the air. Isabel looked down, a perfect picture of concerned grief. "As many of you know," Arthur continued, "we have been worried about her behavior for some time. Her memory, her confusion." He proceeded to present the fraudulent medical report from Dr. Klein. He read excerpts aloud, his voice gaining confidence as he went. He spoke of cognitive decline, paranoid ideation, and inability to process complex information. He was reading my corporate death sentence. "Therefore," he concluded, his voice firming up, "it is with a heavy heart that I call for a vote on Item 1 to formally recognize, based on this medical evidence, that Margaret Reed is incapacitated and unable to fulfill her duties as chairwoman." He looked around the table. All in favor. The hands went up, the conspirators, quick and eager, the nervous ones, slowly, looking at each other, following the majority. Only my three allies kept their hands on the table. Arthur did not care. He had the count. "The motion passes," he declared, a flash of triumph in his eyes. "And now," he said, moving quickly, "we proceed to Item 2. Per Section 8B of the Corporate Bylaws, I call for a vote to appoint myself, Arthur Reed, as the voting proxy for the incapacitated shareholders' 51%. All in favour." The hands shot up again. "Motion passes," he said, the word a hammer blow. He smiled, a real smile, aimed at Isabel. She smiled back. "And finally," Arthur said, turning his attention to Philip Vance, "Item 3. With the full voting power of the controlling shares, I now, as trustee for the good of the company, propose an immediate vote to approve the full acquisition of that 51% stake by Vance Capital, per the terms we have all reviewed." Vance leaned forward, his own smile spreading. "I am prepared to wire the funds upon the vote's conclusion," Vance said. "Thank you. Philip?" Arthur said. "All in favour of the sale?" "Stop," I said, my voice quiet in Frank's office. "Now, Frank." Frank hit a key. In the boardroom, the twin oak doors, which were electronically locked, suddenly flew open with a loud thud. Every head on the monitor snapped to the entrance. I walked in. I was not wearing travel clothes from Alaska. I was wearing my sharpest navy blue power suit, the one I saved for hostile negotiations. My hair was pulled back in a tight, severe bun. My heels clicked loudly on the marble floor. I looked, in every possible way, the opposite of incapacitated. I let the silence stretch. Arthur's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Isabel's jaw had literally dropped, her white-clad angel persona shattering. Philip Vance just looked confused, then angry. I walked slowly, deliberately, to the head of the table. I did not look at Arthur. I looked at the board. "Sorry I'm late, gentlemen," I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice. The traffic from Alaska was just terrible this morning. I placed my hands on the back of the chair opposite my son. Arthur, Philip, before you vote on the sale of my entire legacy, I said. Perhaps you would all like to see a small presentation I have prepared. As I spoke, Brenda Riley and Frank Rizzo stepped in behind me, flanking the doorway. Frank, looking more alive than I had seen him in a year, walked directly to the head of the table and plugged a USB drive into the presentation console. The massive wall-mounted screen, which Arthur had just been using to read my fraudulent diagnosis, flickered to life. As I was saying, I said, pointing, a presentation? The first slide was a screenshot, an email from Isabel's account to Dr. Titus Klein. The subject line read, Family Matter, Episodes. The text was clear, describing my forgetfulness and confusion. That, I said, pointing, is the beginning of a conspiracy to commit medical fraud. The next slide was the same, but further down the chain, Dr. Klein agreeing to provide the necessary documentation to help the family. Isabel's face was no longer pale. It was a mottled red. But fraud is so dry, I said. I think a recording would be better. Frank hit a key. Isabel's voice, seductive and whispering, filled the room. Your mother is not well. She is too old. She is confused. She is losing it. We need the money now. Pay them off. Arthur made a sound, a small, strangled gasp. Pay what off? I asked the room, though my eyes were locked on Isabel. Frank, show them. The next slide was a series of bank statements and wire transfers, a casino marker from Las Vegas for $2 million, another from a private lender for $3 million, and then a corresponding wire transfer from Crestline's consulting budget, approved by Arthur, straight to an account Isabel controlled. Stealing from the company to pay your gambling debts, Isabel? I asked. That is just common embezzlement. And Philip, I said, turning to Vance. He was no longer smug. He looked trapped. You did not think I forgot about you? Frank played the next file. It was grainy, time-stamped at 2:03 a.m. It was the security footage from the executive suite. It showed Philip Vance handing Isabel a contract, and Isabel sliding the signed Helios agreement back to him. A backroom deal, caught on camera. And finally, I said, the payout. The last slide was the wire transfer authorization, the one from our chief legal counsel, sitting right there at the table, to his account in the Cayman Islands. A 7-figure success fee. The lawyer stood up so fast his chair screeched. At that exact moment, the boardroom doors opened again. This time, it was not me. It was 2 men in dark suits, who I knew were from the SEC, and 2 uniformed Chicago police officers. Brenda had timed the call perfectly. Philip Vance, one of the SEC agents, said, You are under arrest for securities fraud and conspiracy. As the officers cuffed him, Isabel finally broke. She lunged, not at me, but at Arthur. It was him, she shrieked, her voice cracking. It was all his idea. He told me what to say. He made me do it. The lawyer and Philip Vance were led out, speechless. The officers turned to Isabel. She crumpled. Arthur, his face the color of ash, slid from his chair and fell to his knees. He looked at me, his eyes streaming with tears. Mom, I am so sorry. Please. I did not know. I did not know about the debts. She She lied to me. She lied about everything. I walked around the table until I was standing over him. I looked down into the face of the son I had raised, the son I had given everything to. She lied, I asked, my voice quiet. Did she lie when she told you to sign the fabricated medical report? Arthur. Did she lie when you called Dr. Eris and told him I was losing my mind? You tried to declare me insane so you could sell my home, my company, my name. Mom, please, he sobbed, grabbing at the hem of my suit jacket. Do not let them take me. I am your son. I am your son. Isabel was cuffed and pulled to her feet, screaming. Arthur, you weak fool. Tell them. I stared at Arthur, his hands still clutching at my clothes. I felt nothing. The grief, the love, the guilt, it was all gone. There was only a cold, empty space. I did not say a word. I simply stepped back, breaking his grip, and picked up the telephone on the conference table. Security, I said, my voice firm. To the main boardroom. Immediately. There is an unauthorized person who needs to be escorted from the building. I looked at Arthur one last time as the security guards entered the room and gently, but firmly, lifted him by the arms. And clean out his desk. I stood there for a long time after they were all gone. The room was silent. I walked to the window, the same one I had looked out of for 30 years, and watched the city that I had conquered, lost, and conquered all over again. My kingdom was safe, but I had no heir. Thanks so much for listening to my story. I am really curious. Where in the world are you all listening from? Let me know in the comments so we can chat and share our thoughts. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and show your support by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.